Ladies, gentlemen, this is the lecture to Ancient and Medieval History for Wednesday, the 15th of September, 2021. Electronics are away, you're all in uniform, and you have your notes open to page side 2. Where we left things, we had talked about the history of Christianity as a distinct thing in its early years. Now, the Jews were expecting a certain kind of Messiah. They were expecting a Messiah that would change the world. Straight? Who's that? Straight. Okay. Now's as good a time as any to introduce a vocabulary word to you. The word is millenarianism. 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 And it's spelled M-I-L-L-E-N-A-R-I-A-N-I-S-M. Millenarianism. M-I-L-E-N-A-R-I-A-N-I-S-M. Millenarianism. Alex. Who's Alex? Okay. I'm going to tell you about millenarianism, and you can probably get a small definition written out of that, and I may even suggest one at the end. Hartel. Okay. Millenarians include the Jews, many of them anyway, many Christians who are focused on the book of Revelations. It includes many Muslims, most Muslims actually. It also includes communists. Here is the basic idea of millenarianism. Volus. The world that exists right now, thank you, is broken. It is a world of pus and waste and sin and yuck and gunk and bleh. Spelled bleh. This world is so corrupted by human sin that a good person, can barely live in it. Owen, where are you? So because this world is so corrupt, it is a trial to everyone to get through this life with a minimum of sin and corruption. Olivia. With a minimum of sin and corruption. But God had something better in mind for us when He created us. Maddie? Strong? I've experienced this with several people I knew who died of old age. Most of the people, most of the time, who I knew who were dying of old age did so with dignity. Can you put that on the floor, please? Oh, yeah. Did so with dignity and did so with a sense that their time had come. Muley, where's Muley?
Here.
However, in an unguarded moment, what they often reveal in their eyes is a sense of betrayal. How could this happen to me, Wallace? How could my body betray me? Dylan. We're going. As if life was supposed to go on so much longer. Now, in the creation myths of Christians, Jews, and Muslims, there are stories of the first people, principally. And the first people lived very long lives. Hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's only the accumulation of human sin and corruption which has shortened our lives to the hummingbird, butterfly existence we now have. Please pass this back to Chloe. As if we were meant to live much longer lives than we do. That's the sense of betrayal. It's not a rational thing. It's an emotional thing, almost. Well, what if God has a plan for history? And when that plan is fulfilled, this world of misery and suffering, of sin and of premature death will be ended, cleansed, purged. Oxford. That's you. What? Oh, that's your thing. Just drop it off on the shelf. Thank you. So, God will send his son, his anointed one. In Jewish, that's called the Messiah. In Greek, that is called the Christ. And this Son of God, this Messiah, this Christ, Riley, Monday, will bring about the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord is also known as Judgment Day. Well, ready? Where's Riley Otten? Or not Riley Otten. I have to say that's a former Otten that I had. Maggie Otten.
Right here.
Right where? There.
Wait, how do you spell your last name?
Auten.
Yo, is your brother Jimmy?
No, he's my cousin.
No way, bro. I love that kid.
You know him?
Yeah.
And he loves him. He loves that kid.
Yeah.
Maori.
We were.
Here.
Where?
Here.
Gestures help. That's wonderful. You're great. Garrett. Okay, good. Now I can focus on my lectures. The day of the Lord will be a day of death and destruction, where the current world order will be destroyed, where the sinners will literally be purged by fire and burned to ash or burned in eternal hellfire. The world will be purified and turned into a heaven on earth. The Messiah will rule, God will be present, and heaven and earth will blend. Paradise will be for those who live through this. That is the belief of the millennium, because it is often referred to as the 1,000 years. The 1,000 years of heaven on earth. 1,000 is mil, millennium is 1,000 years. So millenarianism is the belief that the world should end soon. Merciful God, soon. And be purged in a day of horror and misery. And after that terrible day of suffering, heaven on earth. For whatever 1,000 years really means. It's an undetermined long length of time. Now, Jews are millenarians because they believe that when the Messiah comes, he will, with power, make the world right, bringing the unbeliever under the heel of the Israelite, taking the sinners inside and outside of Israel and getting rid of them, purging them with holy fire. Christians believe that when Christ comes again, the second coming of Christ, that will all happen. Judgment Day, Apocalypse, and then the millennium. Muslims call the Messiah the Mahdi, or the 12th Imam if they're Sunni or Shiite Muslims. And they call Judgment Day the day of Haq. And the millennium is something that they crave and hunger for. Communists, who have some of these beliefs, see the current age as being corrupted by greed and money. Capitalism, they call it. It's really freedom, free market. And thank you. It's fine. I asked you to put it on the floor after all. Their purging day of judgment is the revolution, where the old order will burn and the new communist order will rise. And then their 1,000 years of peace, their millennium, is true communism. All of these beliefs look askance at today's world and say it's too corrupt to last. It's too sinful to be perpetuated. It must end in fire. So, if you understand millenarianism, you're going to see it again and again over the next couple of years. It's alive and well today. There are a lot of people who really think that we should just cleanse the world and start over again. I'm not one of them. So Jesus doesn't fit this bill. Jesus did not come and cleanse the world with holy fire. Jesus did not come as a king, a judge, a conqueror. Jesus came as a carpenter's son who preached to obscure people in a backwater province and died a criminal's death. Maybe he healed some folks too. That is not the description that Jews were looking for. So most Jews never accepted Christ as the Messiah. Some small group did, and it was only when Jews went under St. Paul into the Greek and Roman worlds did Christianity really get its foothold. Christianity never persuaded a large percentage of Jews that it was the way things were. So I told you the story of the Christians up to the fall of Rome. What about the Jews? Well, for about 30 or 40 years after Jesus' death on the cross, and please do sit up, Jews and Christians saw each other as confused cousins. There were some Jews, like Saul of Tarsus, who hated Christians. There were some Christians who were resentful towards the Jews. But in basic terms, Jews and Christians weren't all that different. They didn't fight much. But in the late 60s, and I'm not talking 1960s, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, dude. I'm talking the late 60s AD. You may want to get your bottle there. If that's not yours, you may want to throw it away. Thank you. The Zealots' plan for revolution finally comes to fruition. The Zealots rise up against the Romans and drive the Roman legions out of Judea. They win for a little while. But the Romans are not Greeks. You push them, you may even shove them back a little. They're coming after you. They're going to take your head off if you push them. They're not going to put up with any nonsense. So the Romans mass their armies under a general named Vespasian and march into Judea, inexorably closer and closer to Jerusalem every day. Just before Jerusalem is surrounded by Roman forces, Vespasian goes to Rome to become the new emperor, and his son Titus is left in command. The city of Jerusalem is surrounded by the Romans. It's a hilltop city. The Romans break through the walls, burn the temple of God to the ground. The only thing that's left is the west wall, what's today called the Wailing Wall. Everything else is destroyed. The city of Jerusalem is burned from top to bottom, from north to south, destroyed. Now, on several occasions in Jerusalem and around it, Jesus said, you see all this? It's going to be gone soon. Now, there are people who say, well, he was talking about the apocalypse, maybe. But he certainly could have been talking about Jerusalem 30 or 40 years hence. Jerusalem was destroyed. It was a ruin. But the Romans still had one more fight left. The remaining zealots retreated to an old fortress built by King Herod just west of the Dead Sea in a blasted desert region with no water. The fortress of Masada is built on a butte, on a mesa. So you got this fortress atop this mesa. And when the Roman army approaches, they realize they can't climb. If they climb, the Jews will throw rocks down on them. They'll have every advantage. It's not going to be good. So the Roman commander comes up with an idea, which sounds ridiculous. They will simply build a ramp, an earthenwork and wooden ramp. So they start building this ramp And they also start building a siege engine, a siege tower. And every day, it gets closer and closer to the Jews. And then they bring their siege tower up. Here it is. There's the Jewish wall. And what they're going to do is there's a big drawbridge. They're going to drop down onto the Jewish wall the next day, and they're going to cross the wall and capture Masada. It takes the Romans about 4 years to build this ramp. But they build it. And they bring the siege tower up. And the leader of the Zealots isn't just leading men, he's leading their families. Because there's enough food and water stockpiled there to last years. Many more than 4. So the leader of the Zealots says to his people, tomorrow morning, this will happen. The Romans will drop their bridge, they will enter the Masada fortress, and they will fight us. Now many of us will die killing Romans. But inevitably, some of us will get knocked out and captured alive. Inevitably, some of us at the last minute will want our children and our women folk to live through this. So, if what is going to happen is allowed to happen, the Romans will have slaves. Zealots to parade in Rome in a victory celebration. Our children will be raised to eat meat of the pig and to worship pagan gods. They will have won. Or we could do something that they would never expect. What we could do will echo through the ages. And then he tells them his plan. And the Zealots agree, the men, women, and children do it. The next morning, the siege tower lowers its gate, or its bridge. The Romans come surging across. There's no resistance. There's no noise. There's no movement. Inside the caves and inside the buildings, mothers are cradling their children, holding razors, having sliced their children's veins and arteries open, like a sacrifice animal, and then done the same to themselves, bleeding out quickly. Sometimes a husband and wife would be found together. Everyone in the fortress, man, woman, and child, was either killed by their closest loved ones or committed suicide. There would be no Jews paraded in Rome, not from this group of zealots. There would be no Roman victory. Many Roman combat veterans who had dealt death for decades ended up losing their lunch watching this carnage that the zealots had visited upon themselves. Masada, like the Maccabees, echoes through the ages and is still an important thing in the Middle East. Better to die than to be defeated. Better to commit suicide than to compromise. To this day, Arabs and Jews in the Middle East have a cultural aversion to compromise. In fact, just going to the market in an Arab or a Jewish town in Israel or in one of the many Arab countries, you see an object, there's a price tag. That's for tourists and fools. No one pays full price. No one who's smart or local. You haggle, you dicker, you barter, you bargain, and you come up with a price somewhere in the middle that both parties can agree upon. It's a contest of wills. Just buying a vase at a garden shop is a contest of wills. Who has the stronger will? Who has better concentration? Who has better arguments? And who can walk away from the deal? That's it. Closest we have is buying a car. And even that is tame compared to what goes on in the Middle East. The lesson of the Maccabees is if God's on our side, who can be against us? The lesson of Masada is better death than defeat. Better death than surrender. Death at our own hands. To this day, every member of the Israeli Defense Force swears their oath of allegiance at Masada. It is holy ground to the Israeli people. And it is an example that the Arabs also respect and follow in their own way. So the Jews are defeated in the First Jewish War around the year 70. You'd think that would be it. Except 50 years later, a couple generations raised in the ruins of what had been a prosperous Judea, a man appears. What a man! He looks good on horseback. He's got a great booming voice, big and strong, wise, clear-eyed. His name, Simon Bar Kochba. Simon Bar Kochba, which means Simon, son of Kochba, claims to be the Messiah, the anointed one of God, here to lead the Jews to true freedom and conquest, to bring in the millennium. Unlike Jesus, Simon Bar Kochba fits the bill. He is a heroic man on horseback. He seems to have some magical or miraculous powers. And so most of the Jews, even though they live in the evidence of defeat at the hands of Rome, rise up again to follow the Messiah, Simon Bar Kochba. And again, they drive the Romans out. This is in the early 130s. The Roman emperor at this time is one of the most sophisticated. He's one of the curly-haired, bearded emperors. His name is Hadrian. Hadrian is known as a scholar, as a widely read man, as an emperor who likes to travel around the empire. He likes intellectual discussion. He has a male lover named Antinous, who dies around the age of 20, and who Hadrian makes into a god. This guy is a sophisticator. And while he is capable of war, he likes to be an emperor of peace. But he has had enough of these Jews. They just won't accept reality. So the Emperor Hadrian orders the armies of Egypt, of Syria, and across the Jordan River to amass and to march into Judea towards Jerusalem, not with the idea of conquering, but with the idea of exterminating. The Jews are not going to be allowed to live here anymore. In the year 130, it is as if the Emperor Hadrian has reached into the sand on a beach, stood up, and on a windy day cast up all of that sand into the air, dispersing it. The word diaspora means the dispersion. The first time the word diaspora is used is during the Babylonian captivity, when some Jews went to Babylon and those country Jews stayed home. But the Babylonian Jews came back. Now no one's coming back. Hadrian takes the ruins of Jerusalem, builds a Roman town there called Aelia Capitolina, after his family, the Aeli. And any Jew found within a certain distance of Jerusalem, and it's over 50 miles, and the Holy Land's pretty small, any Jew found in Judea will be tortured until they reveal their family and friends and where they are. And then the Romans will find their families and friends and capture them and torture them to find out who's helping them. You will wish you had never been born if you go back to Judea, Hadrian says. So from this point, in the year AD 134, the Jews are scattered as strangers in a strange land, living in the cities and countryside of other people's lands. They are Inogorodin, people from other towns. They are outlanders. They are a separate people. And we're going to talk about that next time. For now, we're going to go back to the Holy Land. You know who's left? Well, among others, the Christians. Most Christians live in the Greek and Roman world. But there are a few Christians left behind. And the Christians, unlike the Jews, did not rise up against Rome. The Christians had nothing to do with either rebellion. This caused a real separation between Jews and Christians. No longer did they think of themselves as arguing cousins. No, the Jews resented the fact that the Christians didn't help them. The Christians resented the fact that the Jews brought Roman justice and warfare down on their heads. But and the Christians of Judea were called despoicini. Despoicini means the dispossessed. They are led by the descendants of James, a relative of Jesus, blood relative through Mary. Maybe Jesus' brother, maybe his cousin. It depends on who you ask. It's a matter of faith. These blood relatives of Jesus run an increasingly small and insignificant church within the Christian movement until the Islamic conquests come 600-700 years later. About 600 years later. The real Christian dynamic movement is outside in Greece and Rome. You know who else stays? The Philistines. The Samaritans. Non-Jews. Even Arabs from the desert come in. And this area remains a Christian backwater until the Prophet Mohammed's descendants conquered Judea. So now we're going to shift a little bit from the story of the Jews of Judea to the story of Islam. Now, this is not a map of Islam. This is a map of the Achaemenid, or the First Persian Empire. We're going to come back to this when we talk about the history of Greece. But it'll do for our purposes because it shows this part of Arabia. Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, is a blasted desert wasteland with a few oases, with a few wells, and with a wandering nomadic people called the Bedu, or the Bedouin. These are the guys in the Arab robes riding camels. They still live in that traditional style when they can. In the early 600s AD, after the fall of Rome, hundreds of years after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Byzantine Empire is still around, that's a different story. The northwestern region of Arabia is called the Hejaz. The Hejaz after a mountain range in northwestern Arabia, called the Hejaz Mountains. And in the Hejaz region, right about here, is a caravanserai. That's a caravan crossroads town. It's called Mecca. It has wells that are so filled with water that they can support not only a city population, but that they can restock any caravan coming through town. So everyone who is moving by camel caravan through this region of northwestern Arabia is going to stop at Mecca. Now, if you know anything about tourist traps, you know that if you have a crossroads, if you have a place where the truckers stop, there's going to be a gift shop. There may even be some kind of tourist attraction that you can go see in your spare time. Mecca has a cool tourist attraction. It's called the Kaaba. The Kaaba is a cavern. And what the people of Mecca say is that every god, everywhere has a summer home here in the Kaaba. In other words, you may be thousands or hundreds of miles away from your homeland and the gods of your patriotic home. But they have a summer home. You can worship them. You can encounter them. They are present in the Kaaba. So come visit the Kaaba for a small fee. If they made T-shirts, they would have T-shirts that said, I went to Mecca and went to the Kaaba and all I got was this stinking T-shirt. Okay. They make money in Mecca by selling access to the Kaaba. Okay. One day, guy comes home. His name is Mo. And what Mohammed says is, the strangest thing happened to me today. And his family and friends say, what? And he says, this is going to sound familiar, God spoke to me. And they say, right. Because the people of Mecca are neither Christians nor Jews. They are pagans. They worship many gods. Was it the goddess of love? Was it the god of gambling? Was it the god of plagues or war, was it? And Mohammed says, no. The one true God, Allah, the merciful and compassionate, spoke to me. Right. What did he say to you? Well, what he said was that God has been trying to get through to us thick-headed morons for a long time. God sent messages to the Jews through the prophets, but they misinterpreted and they made the law into God. Strike one! The Jews worshiped the true God falsely. They screwed it up. The prophet, Jesus Christ, was supposed to come and correct this, de-emphasizing the law and emphasizing worship in God. But the Christians misinterpret, and they worship the messenger, turning Christ into an aspect of God. Strike two, says Mohammed. That's false. Jesus was, according to him, a prophet like Moses. For the third, implicitly, last time, God is going to try to get through to us. He sends the angel Gabriel to whisper in Muhammad's ear, and Muhammad will write down what is told to him. Gabriel gets it from God, gives it to Muhammad, who then writes it in Arabic. The Quran is in Arabic. I've got a couple of translations of the Quran, but because they're not in Arabic, they are not the Quran. They are caricatures. All Muslims have a duty to learn enough Arabic to read bits of the Quran on their own, in the original language that God spoke, the language of the Holy Quran, that's the Holy Bible according to them, the language of Muhammad. The people of Mecca do not see Muhammad go away and take his people to some promised land. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, they listen to Muhammad go on and on and on about this God. And Muhammad is not just speaking to the people of Mecca, he's speaking to the people on the caravans passing through. He is casting doubt upon the Kaaba, which is going to cost the people of Mecca money. So the people of Mecca have had enough of this guy, and they're going to lynch him. Mobs of lynchers begin to gather at sunset. And when they find Muhammad, they're going to beat him to death, along with any follower stupid enough to stay by his side. They're going to lynch him. They're going to kill him. Well, the thing about lynching parties is they're not subtle and they're not quiet. Muhammad's followers learn what's happening, and they get Muhammad and they start sneaking him through the streets of Mecca. They manage to avoid the mobs and make it out through the walls into the desert. When the military forces of Mecca are then put on the job, get Muhammad and his people. Evading the Meccan military patrols, Muhammad marches north a few hundred miles to the caravan town of Medina. In Medina, Muhammad has an accent. And you all know how charming accents can be. Muhammad becomes the husband of the wealthiest widow in town, a widow who is an owner of many caravans. So with Muhammad's charm and charisma and accent and family connections, he ends up running Medina. Now, most people who are ambitious would be happy running their own mini country, their own free and independent city-state. Muhammad even builds the first mosque in Medina, the first Islamic house of worship. He is in charge of a whole community. But that isn't his goal. His goal is not to rule a backwater community called Medina. The men of Medina are being trained as an army of God. Now, in the mosque, in the holy house of worship, men and women worship differently. They take their shoes off, they nail down on prayer rugs, and they pray facing Mecca. They're called to prayer 6 times a day, 6, maybe 5. I always get that confused. I'm going to say 6. If one of you wants to find out and correct me, you can laugh. It's 5. Yeah.
It was 5, sorry.
Okay. There, mock me.
Yeah.
Okay, 5 times a day. I'll stand corrected. You're a very kind fellow. There are people in this room that will savor that. You're wrong, Jr. You're wrong, Mr. Jr. So, how are they called? Well, beside on the outer edge of the mosque is a solid tower called a minaret. The way you get to the top of this solid tower is with a ladder. That's scary. You're going to climb a ladder made of wood in the desert that has wood rot. So you got to be a person of courage just to climb the tower and climb back again. And when you're at the top of the tower, you are the muzayin, the prayer singer, calling the faithful to prayer. Allahu Akbar! God is great! Allahu Akbar! And then singing verses from the Quran to call people to prayer. We have church bells, they have the muzayin. In Hamtramck, Michigan, which used to be a Polish ghetto of Detroit, it's now an Islamic ghetto of Detroit. The speakers and the muzayyin's call to prayer fills every home so loud. That's here in the United States. So the Medinans are ready for war. And under Muhammad's leadership, they march south to Mecca. And they conquer the place. And as Muhammad's Islamic army of Medina conquers Mecca, the holy hand of God cleanses the Kaaba of the false demon gods, touches the earth like nowhere else. And so the Kaaba becomes the holiest place in Islam because of the unique presence of the hand of God, leaving its traces there. Usually when Muslims conquer a place, they'll leave Jews and Christians alive. Not pagans, but Jews and Christians. But Mecca is different, because Mecca has the Kaaba, because Mecca is where God spoke to Mohammed. So, the people of Mecca who survived the conquest by Mohammed have 3 choices. Choice number 1, they can become Muslims too. Choice number 2, they can go into the desert and find another place to live with whatever they can carry. They're probably going to die in the desert. Or 3, we'll kill you right now. So, Mecca is a city for the faithful of Islam and no one else. And every Muslim man is expected to travel there once in his life on Hajj. We'll talk more about all this. For the rest of his life, Muhammad marches up and down and through, unifying Arabia, building a massive army of jihad, of holy war. When he dies, his children conquer the new Persian Empire. His grandchildren conquer half of the Roman world, even as far as Spain in southeastern Europe. Now, there is something that you really need to understand about Islam as compared to Christianity. The Jewish faith is not dominated by any one person too much. Moses is probably the most important Jewish person that ever lived, but the religion is not completely built around Moses. Islam is completely built around the Prophet Muhammad's revelation of God. Christianity is completely built around the person of Jesus Christ. So the differences in the way those two men lived their lives matters. If a Christian crusader was going off to take part in Christian holy war, wearing armor with a red cross on a white tabard, and a red cross on their shield, and a red cross on their helmet, as they're going to fight for Christ, a little old lady could walk up to them, poke them in the shield, and say, "Sonny, what would Jesus do?" Would he go off to war and kill? Tell me how many times Jesus put on armor and went and fought with weapons. Tell me how many people Jesus killed. I don't know, ma'am. I don't think he did that at all. Right! In Christianity, Jesus' example, which is an example of a traveling preacher and teacher, a healer, who, even at his angriest, just turned over some money changers' tables, is going to allow the moderate Christian to shame the extreme Christian. The crusader may have a good reason to go to war, but the crusader cannot say that this is following in the path of Jesus, because Jesus never went to war. On the other hand, you've got an Arab Muslim man sitting in a study, writing an essay about books that he's written. And a little old lady walks in and pokes the scroll out of his hand and says, "Sonny, what would Mohammed do? Would he sit there and read and write when the faith is threatened?" "No, ma'am. He'd go on jihad." In Islam, the extremist old lady could shame the moderate young man. Mohammed was a general, a judge, a king. He conquered a land. He killed and ordered men killed. He did not hold back. In Islam, the example of Mohammed leads Muslims to take violent action at times in defense of jihad, in service to God. There are differences between Christianity and Islam, and this is one of the biggest. And for those of you who like to believe the American fantasy that everyone is like us under the skin, that the world's just filled with other Americans in funny clothes with odd-sounding names who eat weird food and have strange customs. No, not everyone is like us, because not everyone sees the world as we do. The example of Jesus, for what it's worth, does not encourage violence or holy war. There is violence that happens. There's even crusading. But those are the exceptions. In general terms, Christianity does make people much more peaceful. The Vikings are the most bloodthirsty barbarians in European history until they become Christians. And since then, wars in Scandinavia exist, but they're few and far between. In the case of Islam, the opposite is true. The example of Mohammed to take up arms in defense of the faith, to fight to spread the faith by the sword, is one reason why over 80% of the wars currently happening on earth involve Muslims. It is why there is this tendency towards violence and jihad, because the example of Mohammed calls people to that kind of life. Now, not all Muslims are terrorists, but all Muslims in one way or another have to support jihad. Now, sometimes it can be a struggle in the name of God to lose weight or to teach and preach. But all too often, jihad is holy war, which is what the word really means. A work for God, a sacrifice for God, a holy war. So, that's worth knowing. And if you don't agree, look into it. Study the history a little bit, learn about it, come to your own conclusions. I'm content that you have good judgment, and whether you agree with me or not, if you research it yourself, I'll respect your conclusions, even if I agree with them or disagree with them. Now, Islam conquers the new Persian Empire. It conquers a lot of the Christian world. And you know what? I think there's one other thing I'd like to say, and then we'll be done. And it has to do with Islam and free thought. Ideas are not easy to deal with. If you restrict your speech to saying things that people won't be offended by, you're not going to say much of interest to anyone. Unfortunately, something else that happens in the Islamic world, and this is something that Muslims do to their own thinkers, is they don't trust new ideas at all as a rule. So what if you say something about Islam in front of Muslims? Well, let's compare it. If you make fun of Christians, if you say that Happy Holidays is better than Merry Christmas, if you want to get rid of the Ten Commandments at courthouses and manger scenes on Christmas, if you want to make sure that nobody uses the Christian calendar and that everyone who's Christian keeps damn quiet about it, you'd be in happy harmony with Alexa, Amazon's VI. Because Alexa, if you ask Alexa, and this was true a year or two ago, I don't know if it's still true, who is Jesus?
Oh, wait. Didn't it say it was a fictional character?
A mythological figure.
Yeah.
Even though Jesus of Nazareth was a historical person, he did exist, Alexa, in its politically correct haze, says a mythological figure. Now, you ask Alexa, who is the prophet Mohammed? And Alexa will go into reams of data about how the angel Gabriel spoke God's words into Muhammad's ears, and he's the founder of the faith of Islam. He is a holy prophet, the holy prophet of Islam. Now, why are people so willing to make fun of Christians and not Muslims? Why is it that in the early 1990s, an artist named Robert Mapplethorpe decided to get the National Institutes or the National Endowment for the Humanities to give him thousands of dollars for his great new work of art, Piss Christ, where they took a crucifix and dipped it and kept it in a jar of urine? Yeah, the man made huge amounts of money for that, and he became one of the most famous artists in America because, oh, wow, that's edgy. Look at him challenge Christianity. Yet, you try burning a Quran or throwing it into a bucket of urine. You know what will happen? Somebody will lay a fatwa on you. A fatwa is a death mark. People will be encouraged to kill you personally. A British Muslim named Salman Rushdie in the 1980s took some dicey quotes from the Quran and wrote a book that he called The Satanic Verses. The Islamic Republic of Iran, a national government, laid a fatwa on him. And since the 1980s, this man has had to live in hiding. Because if certain Muslims find out where he is, they're going to follow what the Imam said and kill the guy. Because he said and wrote things. One of the reasons why the boxer, who was born Cassius Clay, who became the world heavyweight champion in the late 60s and then again in the early to mid 70s, converted to Islam and changed his name to Muhammad Ali. When he was asked why he did this, he said, Christians turn the other cheek. I'm sick of turning the other cheek. Muslims are allowed to fight for what they believe, and I'm a fighter. That's his belief. And so he converted. There are Christians who fight too, though, crusaders, and I think that's a good thing, but that's me. In any event, I'm not saying Muslims are bad. I'm saying that there are real differences, and you should know. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr.